Hello and welcome, my name is Idris and today we're finishing this project. Since most of the legwork was done in part 1, this one is going to go fairly quickly. So first, to start off, we're simply going to rename every part. We are going to duplicate every part, then we're going to rename those with the suffix high or the suffix low, depending if it's the high or low version. This is going to be helpful for when we export the model in the end to make to export this project into an external package. And this is going to be helpful since we have similar looking parts. This is going to help us navigate through all these subtools, and it's going to make our life a bit easier. So we're moving everything in the list inside, trying to make it a logical order. So every high part is going to be up top, every low part is going to be on the bottom of the list. Trying to make sure we have the exact names and have everything typed the same. So you want to have the first part before the suffix. You want to have that. Make sure you don't have a typo. So now we're jumping to the low parts, and we're simply going to the lowest subdivision and deleting everything that is above that. For this model, we're targeting 1K, 1K, so 1K, 1000 triangles and a 1024 map. Fairly low poly, not a very important asset. Not necessarily not unimportant, but not overly complex. So we do not need to go overboard unless it's something that will be seen very, very up close to the camera. But let's just say it's just an asset. So stylized. Doesn't need to be more complex than that. For the health guard, we don't have anything to do. We've done everything in part 1, so we're simply going to group visible to get rid of all the polygroups. And now we're jumping to the blade, and we are going to unhide that blade high and use the transparent ghost option to see it when we work on the low version. We're going to select that bottom of the blade, and then we are going to unhide that selection. We're going to invert and delete that selection. Then we're going to hit group visible because we don't need those polygons at the bottom. They're never going to be seen. So that's why we do this. Make sure my phone is silent. And now with the Z modeler, we're going to bridge 2 points. When you are over a vert, you can set that to bridge, select 2 points, and that will enable us to create some triangles. And then on edges, we're going to hit split, and that will enable us to add geometry where we need it and create a bit of triangles as well. Triangles is perfect for when you're making game assets, since most game engines will triangulate those models anyways. Since we hit split here, it tried to create a quad, so it's a floating vert. So you have to be careful where you hit it, and then we're going to bridge it to create the supporting geometry for our cut in the blade. Here we've bridged all of that. Have an extra edge here. We're going to collapse to get rid of it. Then we're going to move that vert, but for some reason it's going to be a bit fiddly. So here I sped that up quite a bit, me failing to make it work. And we're simply going to use the 3D gizmo to move those verts around. So that's me making it not work for some reason. Move didn't want to work. I think it's because it's too low, not enough supporting geometry to make it work. So we're going to mask only the verts we want to edit, invert our selection. And then with the 3D gizmo that we're going to unlock, when you hit that lock, you can move your gizmo where you need it, then lock it again, and now you can actually edit it. And we are using the scale to push those two verts apart, since they're symmetrical. And then we are moving them into position, and we're going to do the same thing for those bottom two verts. Except I selected the top we've already changed, so do that again, scale it, move into position. Doesn't have to be perfectly on it, has to be in the ballpark. But since we're going to make a projection for our normal map, it has to be roughly in the proper position. Mask and move those verts around, and now we're going to add some supporting geometry. Since we have the triangle budget too, we are going to try and smooth that curve of the blade. That is a bit too angular. So we're going to use the split on the edge, and here I'm hitting it, but I didn't notice that I'm still masked. Eventually I will notice it. There. I've learned. So we create that support geometry, then we move it into position to get that curve smoothed out. I'm going to do the same thing for the part, the top part of the blade. Since we have the budget, it's something we can do. Having edges, the outer edges is where you see the lower geometry the most. So your silhouette is the thing that will tell the audience, the people looking at it, that it's a low poly asset. Everything inside the part can be lower, but you want to have more rounder edges on the outside, so it's a better place to spend your budget is on the silhouette. So for that hilt, nothing special. We're just going to pick that center polygroups and delete it, and just leave the two parts that are on top and then group visible. And now we're going to move to the lever strap, and here the Zbrush crashed on me, so we're going to do it twice. But essentially we're going to Z-remesh it. So we're going to hit Z-remesh, we're going to hit our target of 0.15, and then we are going to turn down the adaptive size to 30. And that should give us something low resolution enough, while still maintaining the overall shape. We have to do it twice because for some reason the symmetry was turned off on the first try. So here, now that we've remeshed, we can see we have it's a fairly organic shape, and it's something that we're not really going to get a better result by doing it manually. So that's why it's a good place to use Z-remesh. You just have to play with the settings to get the polygon resolution you want. But here you can see that even though we used Z Remesher, we are going to use Z Modeler to tweak it. It's not because you've created an automatic you use Zbrush to create your geometry that you should just leave it be. So now we just have this stray polygon that we have to get rid of. So we've cut it into using Z Modeler, and then we are going to hide it. We're going to hide everything but that one. Then we're going to, let's see, group visible. That way we can hide it and then hit delete hidden. So if you have a stray polygon like this, for some reason, we've made sure that everything is attached. And now we are going to bridge and create triangles where all these quads have difficulty resolving themselves. So what's happening is that every quad is made of 2 triangles, and where the normal of the hidden edge, the hidden diagonal is, sometimes it creates it's not because it's a quad that it's not made a triangle, essentially. And so if the quad isn't perfectly flat and there's a bit of a slope in the middle to it, it creates an odd shading effect. So we're creating triangles to determine where the shading should be, where the normals should be. Not sure this makes perfect sense, but hey, I'm trying. So here we can see that we don't have enough supporting geometry for a few bits. So we're going to insert a few edges here and there. Then we're going to split a few edges as well. Here we're inserting this edge that we can use as support geometry. And then we are going to move them into position to try and get that slope. What you're worrying about, like I said before, is the it's more about the silhouette. So if something is very, very off of the silhouette, this is where you want to spend your geometry and triangle count. And when you have complex parts like here, this is a good place to add some geometry, because that little indent inside of the strap is something very visible. It's a defining characteristic of that strap. So this is somewhere where you want to make sure that you have supporting geometry to make sure the silhouette is there, and that to make sure you have enough geometry to capture that when you make your normal map. So here we have this divot that we need to fix. Trying to split the geometry, and I did, but I couldn't see that vert, so you have to have a look and keep an eye out for those verts you create, because split will either create a triangle or create a quad, but just having a floating vert in the middle of that edge, so you have to make sure you catch it. Now we can collapse any useless piece of geometry. This is too small of a detail. That curve is that edge is too small, so it's not contributing to the overall shape. Here that flow is a bit wonky. Getting rid of that edge. That is not serving any purpose. When you collapse the imagine the edge you're collapsing, imagine there's a center point. If you're on one side or the other of that center point, that's the direction the edge is going to collapse. So if you want to collapse it towards the left, you have to go towards the left of your edge, and that's how you control where the collapse happens. That edge is bothering me. Doesn't seem like I'm going to do anything about it though, but it's still bothering me now. Getting rid of all these useless edges. So you can spend all the time you want refining this. In the end, you just have to have enough geometry and have it as clean as possible. Here it's a fairly organic shape, so we want to have enough to create our normal map to catch the silhouette. And that's pretty much it. It's not going to be animated, so it doesn't have to be perfect geometry. Or here, what matters is silhouette, and you want to have a clean shading. Here I'm trying to see how I can clean that edge a bit. Here I'm trying to connect those two edges together, but it doesn't work. Most of the time, if it doesn't work, you should maybe try a different angle. Here it's working because I got close up. Bulking out that area. Let's see if here if you get rid of your polygroups and you just look at it flat shaded, it's looking pretty good. So here I'm saving a separate tool. So we're going to separate our tools into two parts. We're going to have the high version be its own file, and the low version is going to be its own file. So we separated those two. Now we are going to go over all of the parts, and then we're going to merge all of them together, and we're going to save that. We're merging all of them together because now we're going towards the end of our project. So now we're going to use UV Master, and then we're going to turn on polygroups. We used auto groups to make sure we have polygroups. We're going to use UV Master. We're going to enable control painting and hit attract from ambient occlusion. That will make sure, that will help UV Master try to create the seams along the recessed parts of the model. We're going to turn symmetry polygroups. I don't think polygroups is going to do a lot, but we're going to turn it off and turn it on anyways, and hit flatten to see the result. And it's pretty good. So Zbrush does a pretty good job to create UVs. It's not the best, most optimized version you can do, but it's pretty good. So here we're going to use it. You can hit flatten and you can edit the model flat. So here we could use the move topological tool or whatever to edit that that model, that flat model. And when you're editing that flat model, you're essentially editing the UV. So we're gonna leave it as is because it looks pretty good. There's a bit of wasted space, so that's not something you really want for a game asset. You don't want to have wasted space, but that's one of the downsides. We're trying to do the most of what we can with ZBrush, so this is one of the limitations you have to be aware of. So we have our UVs, we have our high version and our low version. So now we are going to break, we merged everything together to create the UVs, so to make sure that the UVs are properly laid out for all the parts at the same time. But now we're duplicating that asset, and then we are breaking all those back into their initial piece. So here you want to make sure your naming convention is correct. You can see that here that the blade low, the low is not in lowercase, the L is in high. But so you want to make sure your naming convention is correct, and you want to name all those high and low. And then you want to go back to your high version. We're going to group visible. So you want to make sure that for every subtool you're only you only have one polygroup for every subtool. And you could, for the high version, you could even delete all the lower information. Not that doesn't really matter. You could also decimate it if you have if it's too much information. So here it's 11 million polygons, so that's maybe a bit high. So we're going to, here I'm going to use FBX export to export everything. And you want to use FBX to export everything instead of using the simple export, because the single export will only export one subtool, whilst the FBX export will export all the subtools. So that's what you want. You want a file containing all the subtools with their proper naming. So you want to have a file that will be called something like blade high, and it will contain all the subtools with the suffix high. And then you want to have a file containing blade low, and that will contain all the subtools containing blade low. And that will make sense in the bonus video that will come later on. But that's something that is outside of ZBrush, so it's something you might want to do. You could export every subtool inside of its own OBJ, then importing them one by one in the external package, but it's just a lot more work. So using FBX instead of OBJ will help you exporting all these subtools. Now I think I'm thinking that maybe it's a bit too high, because now we're thinking about exporting everything to the external package to finish our project. So mainly doing the texturing and the rigging and importing them inside of the game engine. So maybe it's a bit too high. Going back to our low poly, just going to export the low poly. Going back to the high version, and then we're going to go to Decimation Master. I'm hesitating between going to 250k or decimating by 20% and going to decimate by 20%. Usually you're supposed to hit pre-process all, but I hit decimate all, and it just gave me a warning message, so it's telling me I should have done that, but I know he will ask me to do it anyway, so just an extra step. So we're going to decimate, and what decimate does is that it goes over the entire model and analyzes the surface, and then determines where the polygon should be distributed to maintain the level of detail while reducing the polygon count. So if you have parts that are flat, like on the blade, it doesn't need a whole lot of geometry, but if you have those indents or that curve, this is where you need to have more geometry. And so we're giving him a budget of 20% of whatever the polygon count was, and he has to use those 20% to try to keep the geometry, the level of detail, but reducing the geometry count. And usually 20% you can, unless of course you're working with a low poly version, but if you're working with a model that is in the millions, usually 20% you cannot tell the difference unless you're really looking at it very, very close. So yeah, 20% it's almost lossless. It's like working from going from a PSD file to a JPEG, but having that JPEG be the highest quality. So it's not a working format like PSD. It's not the working format, so you can't. It's really hard to edit once you've decimated that model. But if you want to export it, you can save a ton of geometry and memory space and all of that. So it takes a while. So we finished pre-processing, so now I'm decimating all. And we went down from 11 million to 2.2 million. So that's something a lot more manageable. We're going to export that. And that's going to wrap up this video series. I hope you found it useful. If you have comments or questions, please do leave them in the comment section. That's what it's here for. I'm going to be making a bonus video to wrap this project, but outside of Zbrush, inside of Substance Painter. So I hope you find these videos useful. If you did, please do subscribe if you haven't. I'll like if you found it useful. Have a look at all the links I have inside of the description. Maybe you'll find something useful for you. And I'll see you guys in the next one.